everybody, and thank you for joining us again on the Secure After Dark podcast. I'm your host, Tanner, and we've got a awesome guest from most of the way across the world with us right now. And there is no whiskey today because just some coffee, because it is 10 a.m. for me on your time. I hope that you have some or some beer or something, but you know. This is Simon Bennetts. He is the what'd you say? The founder of Zapped and many of the projects. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm certainly not the founder of Zapped because Zapped is not part of OWASP anymore.
I'm sorry. My bad. That's a. I'm still used to saying that. I've been using it for a long time.
A lot of people. I've got out there at one stage. I had to stop myself. Now I'm getting used to it. Founder and one of the project leads. Yeah, we've got a core team, four of us who look after it. But founder and project lead will do.
Awesome. Well, I'm interested in hearing about yourself. You know, I mean, I think it's an awesome tool, and we'll dive into that and some of any of the projects you want to talk about. But just tell us a little bit about some of your backstory and kind of where you're from. How'd you get into all this?
So based in the UK, I was a developer, Java developer, developing. I'm a team lead developer. Was developing an online service for a particularly large financial company in the UK. We knew the project was security critical, so we focused on the security. I had no security training, of course, but you can pick these things up. I mean, there's no weird things about security, is there? So got the pen testers in, week before launch or something, of course. I got them in, sat them down, told them everything about the system. These people are on our side. I wanted them to find anything there was a problem before it went live. So gave them access to everything they wanted. Came back in an hour later just to check, see if I could explain anything to them that had any misunderstandings. And one of them was logged in as me, super user. They didn't have those credentials. They hadn't cracked my software. They'd cracked the single sign-on system for the whole company in 1 hour.
Wow.
This was, at that point, it was like, this is not going to go the way I wanted. So it seemed like a complete car crash. I've since delivered worse pen test reports myself, so it wasn't that bad, apart from the single sign-on problem, which wasn't my team, so kind of, but I prided myself on being a good developer. I built scalable, performant, very functional systems, not particularly front-end ones, but good, solid back-end systems. Clearly, I didn't know how to build secure ones. So, time to learn. Now, I had to admit, I hadn't heard about OWASP at that stage. So, found out about OWASP, found out about the top 10, understand those things. But I don't learn particularly well by reading stuff. I like playing with things. So I want to play with stuff. I want to see how cross-site scripting works, what the problems are, how do you find these things? And I also thought, find an open source tool we can plug into, run every night so I don't get embarrassed in front of the pen testers again. And I was also thinking it would be kind of nice to get involved in open source. I'd used it for many years. I was thinking that it was time to add various ideas for open source projects, but if I could find an open source web security tool, could, hit several birds with one stone. So there were no maintained open source web security scanners out there at the time. None. This made me sad. I wasn't happy about that. It felt wrong. But there's some old ones. There's Web Scarab, which I didn't really get on with. A tool called Paris Proxy. Quite like that. Played around with that. Started messing around with it like that. So I started learning about things. But I wanted to make sure I knew what the stuff was going in. So I started giving basic presentations to other developers in QA where I worked. If you can stand in front of explain stuff, you have to kind of know it better. And people ask awkward questions. You go, I don't know. I'll have to come back to you. But every time, first question was, what tool should we use? Okay, I better go and have another look. And again, looked nothing out there that was being maintained. I didn't want anything that was too sophisticated. I wanted to be cross-platform. I was a Linux guy. Everyone else was using Windows. But, I wanted to be automated, but that was kind of a bit much at the time. But it needs to be maintained in some shape or form. Nothing out there is being maintained. Although actually, I had started playing around with Paris Proxy because I'd liked it, and it was written in Java, and I'm a Java dev, so I pulled it into Eclipse. And there was one menu item which was you could go to the resend, but from either scripts or history, but not the other way around, and that annoyed me. So I thought, well, I've not done any desktop programming, but let's have a pull it in, find where it is, put it in there. Things go wrong a couple of times, get it working. It's like, oh, this is quite fun. Wonder what else I can do. So I'd started playing around, and I realised that there was a maintain tool out there. It was Paros, and it was on my machine. So, okay, let's go for it. So I renamed it Zap. I created a load of accounts which had nothing to do with me in case I got sued or the security community laughed at me or something, and just released it on BugTrack and said, fork of Paros Proxy, really designed for developers. Other people may find it useful. Community tool, please get involved. And it just took off. A lot of people got in touch, and it went from there, really.
Yeah. What year was this, about the time that you had the release?
So the release was in 2010. The pen test was actually in 2009. So I went through quite I added help and things, and I had to get my nerve up to actually release. My first open source project, first open source contribution was releasing Zap. So it was a bit of a big step. And actually, somebody else released a fork of Paros Proxy just before me, and I was like, at the timing, it's been out there for so many years, and no one's done anything, and now two people fork it, and within months. But I chatted to the guy Axel who was doing it. He was looking much more pen testery things. I was looking more development side. So we agreed to kind of keep help each other out, really.
Okay, gotcha. Was this prior to? I'm thinking of like Nikto is the one that everybody way less features, but Nikto is the thing that always comes up whenever you're taking like an intro to web app type of offensive security class. And it still does, although I honestly think it's a bit of a relic at this point. I know it's still updated. I know there's great people on the project. I just haven't found reasons to go back to it as somebody who does the offensive side. Was this prior to that, or was that already hanging out?
I think that was hanging out. It didn't do enough for me. I wanted to be able to see what was going on. The fact that, I'd seen, that found cross-site scripting and I'd never heard of cross-site request forgeries. Like, how does this work? I want to see what's going on. I want to look under the covers. I want a tool that allows me to do that. I wanted a tool that would do automated stuff. But I know, I knew then, I know now, you can't automate everything. You've got to do manual stuff. And I wanted a tool which had allowed me to see what was going on, automated the simple stuff, and allowed me to get stuck into the more interesting things.
That's an interesting kind of aside I'd like to take is you have to do stuff manually. You can't automate everything. I see, almost every day, some new product where this is an automated pen test platform. You just set it and let it run, and it's gonna be the best pen tester you've ever had. And I think that even with the the big advancements of large language models and all the quote unquote AI crap going around, I don't see offensive security being replaced anytime soon. I think that you have to have somebody there that has a creative mind that can see things and draw conclusions that are possibly nonsensical and may work.
Absolutely. And we've never said Zap is the only thing you need. But I think you have to understand what tools you have available, and by tools I mean different types of things you can do. So I worked at Mozilla for a while on the security team, and we would do automated scanning. We would have pen tests, and we'd have bug bounties. But when it comes down to it, bug bounties are people who do bug bounties are focused on certain types of things where they think they can make as much money as easily as possible. Mm-hmm. Pen tests are great. A good pen tester is worth their weight in gold, but that's what you have to pay. So, we were paying the kind of 40 to 80 grand for a pen test on one service. How many hundred? I can't remember how many hundred services we had. So at that time, there's probably loads more now. So you can't afford to pen test all of your services all of the time. So, all right, you can do internal ones, but it's still going to cost you the time of people with a lot of expertise. So you want to automate as much as you can. And I think it's in pen testers' best interest. I've done some pen testing, and it's like you start finding simple stuff, and you go, come on, it's just right, a bit of handle turning, churn something out, and get on to something interesting. Whereas, if the pen test I did at Mozilla, where we got, I was running them for the external companies, and it's like they would, several days in, they wouldn't have found anything because we had really good developers, we had a lot of automated testing, and then you could see them really knuckling down, and you got good value out of them. So, I think it's really important to have a blended approach. Bug bounties are great for certain types of things. Pen tests are really great, but they're expensive, and you can't pay them to test your stuff all the time. So you want to automate as much as possible, and then get the experts in to really give this stuff a go.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, I couldn't be more in agreement. And I mean, it may sound biased coming from some people who do manual testing. Like you need to do it, but you really do. You really do. So one thing somebody asked me, I asked a couple people, I said I had you coming on, and they were kind of like, oh, well, you should ask him, X, Y, Z. So I've got a couple of questions written down. One of the ones was why Java, which you kind of explained. You're a Java dev historically. And then the same guy asked if you had considered like Rust or Go or doing any kind of a revamping of it to try and work on some speed for it, or not that it's particularly slow, but just curious about that.
Yes, so this comes up a few times. We actually have a set of frequently asked questions on zaproxy.org, and
probably should have read those.
It's all right. It's why don't you rewrite Zap in my favorite language?
Right.
And the trouble is, Zap has got a huge code base, and the main developers on Zap are Java devs. That's what we do. So we could rewrite it in any other language. Rust, really great language, steep learning curve. Go, I've just started playing around with Go on another project, really enjoying it. If I started a new security tool, I'd be tempted to use Go. But none of us are experts in these things, so it would take us many, many years, and we'd start off being very bad. In the meantime, we wouldn't be able to do things on Zap. So, it was a really good choice at the time, particularly given our skill sets. But, I mean, we're struggling to get funding to actually keep on developing Zap as it is. To get a complete rewrite, it's going to need you lots of millions.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's not a small task. It's kind of like the dumb example is my truck's made of steel. It's heavy. Why don't you remake it in aluminum? It's like, well, you have to remake a truck. Yeah. I think okay. Well, I mean, that's essentially the answer that I anticipated and all that. So one thing I was wondering is kind of how do you keep up with all there's new tools coming out all the time, especially you just look for things on GitHub and you find new things like every day. The new tools coming out all the time. There's new techniques. The techniques get way, way more complex. If you look back to, the start of Zap 2010, it was, 1=1 type of SQL injections. It was mostly pretty routine stuff. And you look at the same attack vectors, and today it's almost infinitely more complex. So how do you keep up with the changing exploits and new tools and keep your, what you're maintaining to that level?
With difficulty. I mean, when it comes down to it, there's two of us working nearly full time on Zap, compared with commercial companies who have, a couple of good examples, have hundreds of people working on them.
Yeah.
So there's a limit to what we can do. We try and keep an eye on things. But I always wanted Zap to be a community tool. It would be great to get more people. We do rely on the community to tell us stuff and to get involved. So the more people who get involved, the better, really.
That's kind of why I wanted to do this, honestly. Let's get, people don't realize it. I guess, this is a good jumping off point to kind of jump into a lot of that. We were talking a little bit before we started. A lot of people refer to Zap as a scanner or as an automated scanner. And I do not think that the vast majority of people in offensive security, whether, especially, by the way, as like amateur people getting into it, learning in school and everything like that, the schools mostly are teaching on Nikto and stuff like that. And then they teach on Burp, which is great tools. Those are all great projects. But I'm like, there is something free right in front of you, community made, that you can just use and do everything you need to do, and people don't know it. Would you be down to dive into, because just to start you off, like, I do a lot of fuzzing in Zap. I still use Fuff a bit. It depends what I'm doing. Really targeted stuff I really do like Zapped. Directory, but you need to looking for any other directories, spidering like that. Looking for password spraying is something that we do in Zap sometimes. So kind of what's some things you can do in it that people may not even be aware of?
Great question. And, I think you're right in that people don't understand what Zap is capable of. What we try to do is provide a whole lot of low-level functionality to allow you to get access to everything. And one thing we believe very firmly is that, we're open source people, and I would love more people to learn on Zap, because you can see what we're doing. There's nothing hidden. And the other thing is you can get involved. So we've actually had a load of students work on Zap, partly through Google Summer of Code, but a load of work directly on it. Just someone will ping me saying, I'm working on a degree. I've got to do a project. Can I do it on Zap? It's like, absolutely. We'll mentor you that. So there's a Zap Student Hall of Fame on our website with a whole list of all the students who made major contributions, and some of the biggest features in Zap have been implemented by students.
Really?
Things like WebSocket support, which we had before pretty much anyone else. The Ajax Spider, again, before pretty much anyone else. There's a whole, open API importing. It's just a massive range of things that have been worked on by students. So there's, one thing what we always used to get people complaining about is host header manipulation. Previously, you couldn't do that in Zap because of the network stack. Well, that's no longer a problem. We've actually replaced the entire network stack and had to rework that. So that's something. Nobody's told me anything. I'm not aware of anything you can't do in Zap that you can do in Burp. We've got HTTP2 support, out-of-band testing, so you can do that. We've got an equivalent to a collaborator. There's loads of things. And one of the big strengths of Zap is scripting.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, so what we've done in Zap is there's loads of different places where you can insert scripts. So we've got lots of different types of scripts, and scripts are all powerful. So, obviously, you can go in and change the Java code and get Zap to do whatever you want, but, you need an IDE, and, if you're in the middle of an engagement, that's kind of challenging. But scripts have the same permissions, and they have access to all the same data structures. And because it's open source, there's nothing is hidden. So we've got a huge range of scripts. You can do so many different types of things. We've got loads of examples, and you can even add UI elements. So you can actually change Zap UI. You can basically read Zap on the fly, because we've got a script console, and you can actually create the scripts in Zap. You can run them in Zap, and you don't even have to switch between things. It's all there. You go, okay, that's not working. I got it right. Now it's working. So Zap scripting is really, really powerful, and that's something I don't think people quite understand. I had a good example when I worked in Mozilla. There was a particular site I was pen testing, and you could choose your username and you put any character in. But you couldn't change your username, and you had to use a single sign-on system that was a Mozilla specific one, and you had to go through the whole email thing. So to automate attacks against that, you basically had to have a new account every time. Now that's challenging, but there's a scripting language called Zest, which it's kind of graphical scripting language within Zap. And at that time, it couldn't handle browsers. So I changed it to handle browsers, driving Selenium. So what that meant was I was able to create a script using Zest, which drove Selenium, which would basically go to this particular site. It would say, right, create a new user. It would then launch a new browser of the single sign-on system. It would then put in a semi-random mailinator.com address. It would then go to mailinator.com, approve it, and then go back. And I was logged in. So that was one script. And then because it's a script, I just wrapped in another script, which put in the user, the name with a load of DOM-XSS attacks in there. So it just went through creating new accounts, approving emails, going through the whole thing. And I just sat there, watched it while new windows came up, waiting for something to pop. So doing that manually would have been in complete pain. But, all that, so and I told the Mailage.com guy, and he was like, you can't release that. I was like, check with boss. You don't mind if I release this, do you? No, fine. Oh, good. Right, it's released.
Good. That's the reaction you want. Yeah, absolutely. No, release it. Yeah. Because if I always say, as I don't know if the white hat term or not, but like as white hats essentially, if we could figure it out, so can somebody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's our job. We are the representatives of the evil hacker.
Right.
So we've got to think the same ways. We've got to, do the same kind of things. Just we're not destructive and don't make money out of these things. But hey,
right. Yeah, we're just make a little less than ransomware payout. But hey, we got to go to sleep at night and not hate ourselves. So I guess that's worth something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there, real quick on Zest, I actually was not very familiar with Zest up until a couple of days ago, whenever I was kind of reading some extra things, thinking of some things I wanted to ask. Which kind of leads me to ask, how do you, as somebody, I use this, and we'll probably recover this again at the end, kind of for brevity for people. But how do you keep up with that? How do you, as me, a user, how do I keep up with things like Zest being added that maybe I don't even know are there right under my nose?
Oh, good. Yeah. It's tricky. We've got, the Zapped user group. We've got a developer group. There's a Twitter account. I am recording some recorded videos. We've got over 100 videos now on zappedproxy.org. So there's a lot going, but we're, there's a lot of stuff on the website. We try and document everything. Well, we do document everything because if it's not documented, it doesn't exist, basically. I'm surprised at the number of times people ask us the features we already implement. Because I always thought people, when I get a new tool, I play around and go, what does this do? Let's go through all the menus things. But a lot of people don't seem to do that, or maybe we put them into obscure places. But it's difficult. Designing UI is hard. There's so many options with Zap. You look at the Zap when you start up, it might look complicated, but there's so many things we've hidden, particularly behind context-centered menus, just because we don't want to overload people. So you don't see loads of tabs until they actually are needed, or when you actually ask to see them. So there's so many things. So I can understand why it's difficult to keep up with things. But yeah, Zap, we try and announce stuff on Twitter and Zap user groups. So.
Okay. Got it. After, using it for years, I would still run into stuff and I'm like, is that a new feature or did I not know about that? And I'm usually never sure. But yeah, okay. So check out the Twitter, check out the website, everything's on there. Got it. Good.
Yeah. Good. One thing I keep on meaning to do is we've talked about putting auditing in. And I'm hoping I'm going to try and do this at some point, because if we had audit points, we would then have a count of all the features, so we could actually have some on the desktop. You've used 6.2% of Zap features, which bit of gamification, so that'd be quite nice.
That would be very cool. So speaking of all these different features that people aren't even aware of, what is some of your craziest stories about either yourself or somebody else using it? What's some of the coolest owns you guys have gotten?
Well, the problem is people don't tell us. We don't get to find these things out. And I did used to get calls from Freaky Clown. I'd get hey, look, Simon, I'm on some site. I can't tell you where it is or what I'm doing, but how do you do this in Zap? Okay, sure, yep, I'll let you. But we don't find out. So very few people tell us. I did find out from someone who definitely in a position to know that there was a particularly large bank in the US, and they were trying to. They tested all the DAS tools out there, all the commercial ones, trying to do automated scanning of their web apps, and none of them worked. And the problem was basically some pop-ups that were coming up, before you can log in, so you can actually say, yes, it's GDP or whatever. And they couldn't get any of them to work. The one exception was Zap, because we can script anything. So, when a browser gets launched, you can actually put a Selenium script in which runs. So you can actually go, okay, we know this is going to be here. We now do this before it hands over. So Zap was the only tool they could actually get to scan their web apps. That's one reason, because we get so little feedback. That's why we make Zap so flexible, and that's why we have such low-level support for things, because people don't tell us what they need or what. So we just put everything in, and we try and make sure you can do anything we can think of. And someone say, we can't do this. It's like, okay, right. We don't know why you want to do this, but we'll try and make it happen. So we don't get much feedback, but the little we do is like, it's really powerful.
You hear that, users? Give them your feedback, myself included, because up until now I have not done that. I mean, we've used it to compromise SAP portals, and I mean we've done all kinds of stuff. I mean, typical web stuff. I will say I'm not primarily a web app guy. I'm our principal engineer. I kind of just do everything that gets thrown at me, which includes a fair bit of web app, but I'm not like the web app guy. I'm really more of an internal network type of guy, red teamer. But I still kick my way around in it. One of the things that one of our main web guys had wanted me to ask you was the live attack relay. How did that end up birthing? How did that end up becoming a thing?
Live attack relay, what's that?
I'm not actually sure what he's talking. Oh, sorry, live attack overlay. I can't read, my bad.
So I think he's talking about the heads-up display.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So heads-up display is something that I came up with years ago, but I didn't have time to do. So the principle behind this is one thing I worry about is that sometimes pen testers spend too much time in the tool. So they spend too much time in Zap or Burp, and that seems a strange thing to worry about as an author of one of these tools. But what I know is there's certain technical attacks, the cross-site scripting, SQL injection, but the really fun attacks are the logic ones. And for that, you really have to understand the application. And no tool will find those because it's abuse of the applications until we get AI models that are coming close to human intelligence. We can't, tools can't do that kind of thing. So you have to have someone who thinks in a certain way, particularly malicious way, how can I abuse this system? And for that, you have to focus on the application rather than the tool. And so what I wanted to be able to test an application in the browser, focus on the application, but get information from Zap. So that was the idea. It's like, well, you want a heads-up display. Okay, how do you do that? What would that mean? So the Zap HUD basically brings information from Zap, so your alerts, the information like that, things like, are there hidden fields and a whole range of things. Make it available on the edges of your screen so you can kind of ignore it. You can hide it if you want. You can kick off the SPIDE or active scanner, all these kind of things. And I was hoping it'd be more popular than it was. Some people seem to love it, but again, we didn't get a huge amount of feedback. I didn't do the main implementation. We actually it was originally a Google Summer of Code student came to us about this. They came up with something similar idea, but they wanted to do a Chrome extension. I was like, I work at Mozilla at the time. And also, at the time, browser extensions had limitations. And I thought, well, we can do so much in Zap because we're consensual man in the middle, manipulation in the middle proxy. We can do anything. So the HUD actually works by manipulating everything on the wire. And so it works in Chrome and Firefox. But it's complicated and we don't have anyone to maintain at the moment. So it's still ticking along, but I think some people love it. But yeah, it's not something we can focus on at the moment, unfortunately. So if anyone wants to take it on and actually keep on maintaining it and making it better, then please get in touch with me.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some takers about it. I mean, that's something I'll even have to dig into more. I've seen, a little bit, haven't actually used it a ton. That's one of those things. So I'll ask him about this after this. Like, hey, show me what you like about it and, everything around there. Can you share, and it's okay if the answer is no, anything on the roadmap that may be exciting, any features you're working on or anything like that?
Well, I mean, one thing is, something I don't know if people are aware of, we've had a lot of funding problems. So we've actually there's a company called Crash Override who are sponsoring myself and Ricardo, the other main developer. But there's a time limit on that. It's brilliant what they're doing, but we need to find a way to make Zap self-funding. We've got some things like commercial support we offer now, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. So we are seriously thinking about relicensing Zap. We would stay open source, or we'd have a commercial license, but we would have an open source license. It would probably be AGPL v3. So because we know there are a lot of companies out there building commercial services on top of Zap, and they don't give us any money. Yeah, and it's very difficult to maintain something like Zap when you haven't got any money coming in.
So that sounds impossible.
Yeah, so that's something. So it's quite possible that'll be happening, and if we do that, then it'll be a Zap version 3, which means we can put some big changes in. So we are definitely looking at a whole range of changes. We're just just started looking at that, but some fairly structural changes under the covers, which might not be immediately obvious, but would have a big impact going forward. But there is, we've got a student working on gRPC handling at the moment. So that's something which it's a fun one for people to look forward to. But yeah, other than that, it's a lot of stuff under the covers probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that sounds... The licensing thing, it's like everybody loves open source. We love to be open source, but it's not. It comes with its own issues. It comes with, primarily money, right? That's what it is. You have to have it. You can't not have it, especially if you want to dedicate it to something. It's different whenever it's something you're working 4 hours a week on the weekend, or 6 hours, something like that. It's a bit different than whenever it's something that becomes this huge thing that requires full-time development and support. And that's obviously I can only imagine how much of a bear that is to try to take on and keep it open source, especially for as long as you guys have done it.
Yeah, I said we're competing with companies who have hundreds of employees. We've got 2 of us now working full-time, obviously a lot of contributors, but we need full-time people. There's no way around it. It is a massive project. Well, I think GitHub is like 45 repos or something like that. It's something crazy.
Wow.
It's a huge amount going on, and we'd love to do more. I've had 5 people or 10 people. We could do so much more. I think we talk about Burp, and they've got 120 people. We're not 60 ex-engineers. We're pretty good, but we're not quite that good. So it's...
I think if you were to compare side by side, I think it's incredible that a tool that's been developed and maintained primarily by 2 people is at the level that it is. It is an almost equally comparable tool. There's certain things that people really like in Burp, but I think you can really do it in Zap as well, especially when talking about scripting. Yeah, I think that unlocks a lot of power. I think there's some automations on the other side, but I think if you just take some time and figure out some scripting, you could probably do more than you ever imagined. That's probably my next direction with it. Is we do our little internal classes here. I may try to do one on some scripting. I may try to figure some stuff out, learn a little bit of Zest, and try to do a little internal class on some of that. So that's also how I selfishly learn things for myself. Is I say I'm going to teach a class on this, and then I have to
exactly. Yeah, that's that's how it started off. As you teach stuff, and then you go, right, now I really have to know this.
Yes, absolutely. Have there been any features that you really wanted to implement that just didn't really work out? Anything that was like, I don't know, just didn't plan out or didn't really make sense whenever you got down to the wire?
I think my concern is we haven't made enough of things. So something like the HUD, I think, is really innovative, completely unusual. Some people love it. I would love to take that to the next level. Don't have enough people to do that. Zest, Zest is incredibly powerful, and we should have made a lot more of it, and it could still do so much more. So we should have actually had, rather than have a JSON format, we should have a YAML, so we could just write it much more easily. But it's incredibly powerful. It's all Zest is all about. It's a scripting language for security and for websites. So it's making requests, manipulating them, but it's got you've got conditions, it's got loops. So there's so much you can do with it. And you can create active scan rules, passive scan rules. There's loads you can do, but we haven't been able to document enough. We haven't been able to push it enough. So it's missed opportunities due to a lack of people to work on stuff, I think. And another one. I mean, when it comes to automation, authentication is complete pain. Whereas now, Zap has really low level support for things, which is great because people who know Zap can actually configure it to handle anything. But if you don't know Zap, it's a bit of a too steep a learning curve. But we've now got auto detection for authentication. So for a lot of websites, you can just put a URL and credentials, and Zap handles everything for you.
I've had pretty good luck with that.
Yeah, and well, tell us. I want to know more about this. We don't get enough feedback, but I know it doesn't work in all cases, and I'd love more feedback and more people to work on this and go, okay, here's examples of it doesn't work. We've got a repo where all our extensions are, and there's an extension just for testing these things, so we can set up very simple authentication flows that we can prove Zap doesn't handle, and then fix it so it does.
Okay, yeah. No, I think we keep coming back to people need to talk to you, tell you. That's the way open source project works. You're not doing market research. You're not going out and doing all these surveys, and you don't have time for that. So yeah, you're really relying on people like me who's selfishly not reaching out and telling you what's going on. So yeah, absolutely. One other thing I wanted to ask about is what I have not touched any of these Zap API. What are some reasons somebody might want to dive into that, and what can you do from the API? I mean, I imagine whenever I think of it, I think of, okay, you can automate things, but it sounds like you can do a lot of that in the tool without it. So what would be some benefits of going straight to the API?
So I actually don't recommend the API so much anymore. So I mean, one thing we know, we are competing with Burp. Burp is a great tool. Loads of very good people working on it, so it's difficult to compete on certain levels. But scripting and automation, I think, are two things where we do really well and potentially beat Burp. So why do I say not the API? Because we found that the API is you have to understand exactly how Zap works. You have to understand more of the Zap internals. And the API is very thorough. It covers most of Zap functionality, same as you're sitting in front of a desktop. It doesn't cover the fuzzer yet. Plans to do that. But what we've got is we have, obviously got the desktop. We've got a command line option, a very simple way of automating Zap. Very few options. Don't recommend that. We've got package scans. They run in Docker. They're pretty good, but there are limitations to them. And we've got GitHub Actions as well. But the thing I reckon for most people is something called the automation framework. So the automation framework, actually, you can run it in the Zap desktop, or you can run it from the command line. And that means you can actually run it in the desktop. You can try it out, and you can test it and go, okay, now it's working. But it ends up as just a YAML file, which is a set of jobs for Zap to run. And that is, it's got all the standard things you'd expect, and it's got a lot of flexibility as well. So for most people, I'd recommend the automation framework. And one of the advantages is it's got very good support for statistics. And this is something that always used to worry me when I was at Mozilla. It was like, I've set up these automated scans. I've checked they work. How do you know they're carrying on working? How do you know they're doing what you expect, what you thought they should do? And that's hard because I had one case where set it up to handle authentication, worked fine. And then 6 months later, I got an alert saying it wasn't working. Now, I got that alert because I put checks in because I was paranoid. And sure enough, it stopped working. Why did it stop working? Oh, the team had changed the authentication provider, completely changed authentication. Of course, it wasn't going to work. But if I hadn't put check in, I wouldn't have known, and then it would just been broken. So what Zap has is it's got internal statistics. We maintain statistics about loads of things. And the automation framework has really good support. So for any job, you can check pretty much any statistic and go, okay, so we put something in by default. If you put in, say, use the traditional spider or the Ajax spider, expect to find 100 URLs. You can change that. You can have it as a warning. You can have it as a failure, whatever you like. But you can check things, can check authentication statistics as well. Did Zapped succeed in authenticating? Have you got too many authentication failures? All of these things. So we've got very fine-grained support, so you can check Zapped is doing exactly what you want. Check that particular URL was found. Check that there was particular content. All of these things. So my recommendation in most cases is the automation framework is your best option. The API is good if you've got if you actually want to have much more direct control over Zap. The trouble is Zap was never designed as a long-running service. Its roots in desktop tool. We talked about having kind of Zap as a service and changing Zap, but in the end, if you're having a kind of online Zap service, then you're probably going to have a lot of long-running jobs. And for those, I think you're actually better off launching separate Zap instances. You've got complete isolation. There's no chance of bleeding stuff between because they're separate processes, So we don't have to worry about users or roles or access control, So having, one separate Zap instance for one particular scan. And if you're automating these things, you probably know what you want to do. There's no point in having direct control of, run the spider, then run this spider, then then do this. And we've got, we have some control within the automation framework already. So you can run this traditional spider, which handles traditional web apps very well, doesn't work with modern ones. One of the passive scan alerts we have is, does it look like a modern app? Okay, if it looks like a modern app, then run the Ajax spider. So you can actually do traditional apps very quickly, detect it's a modern app, and then run the Ajax spider, and then carry on like that. So we have all these kind of features in there. So I'd say in most cases, I recommend the automation framework. As I said, you can test it and play around with it in the GUI and then export it to run from the command line. But the API is still there. It's not going to go anywhere. We're going to keep on maintaining and adding more features.
That kind of reminds me of talking about exporting. One of the things that I had two people tell me is they said, you should ask him what they're going to do for implementing reporting. And I was like, you mean where you hit generate report and it generates you one of like a dozen formats that you'd like, and there's all kinds of templates? And they were like, what? Like these are professionals who they do pen tests for a living. And it's yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I keep coming to over and over that shocks me is I'm like, man, well, let's talk about some of the generating report type of stuff. How have you approached those to see what type of reports are good? Is it kind of what you would want from having been, a customer on the side of receiving reports, or like a dev? Kind of what is your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, for years, and this is probably what it comes back to, the reporting was basically the old Paris report. So it was very inflexible, very old-fashioned, and people kept on complaining about it, rightly so. Just got to the top of the list and said, okay, going to sort this out. So what we did years ago, added support there's a templating language called Timeleaf. So we used that, and we actually had a competition where people could submit their own reports, templates, and we gave out prizes for that. But basically, we've documented how this works. So you can create your own report templates. And what we try and do is make sure that as much information as we think is useful is available, but really I'd like everything available. So, there's a set of things I know we can't get into reports right now. But, we had certain we had requests like, well, what about you say all the things that fail, what about things that pass? It's like, well, that's an obvious one. Companies want to, it's not just the failures. We tested for this and we didn't find any problems. Got it. Right. So that information is available in reports, so we put it in particular ones. But yeah, we kind of, again, we're providing low-level stuff. We're saying, well, you can write any templates you want with this templating language, which is well documented. Here's the data we've got available. If there's other stuff you want access to, let us know and we'll put it in. This is your data. We want you to have access to it. And if you want to contribute any of your great reports back, then please do. But yeah, it's not our requirements are important. It's your requirements. So yes, let us know and implement your own and contribute them back, or tell us what you need, and we'll try and make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you did nail it there. And reporting is something that's incredibly difficult to do because people don't want the same things. For example, I've delivered several hundreds of reports to customers, and it's always what we've kind of arrived at is where we've got, a report, our executive summary, and then we've got, okay, here's the actual attacks that we did. Here's some statistics and some screenshots. And then it's almost like a third report where it's like, here's the real breakdown that you give to your engineers. So it's here's what you give to your board, here's what you give to your manager, and here's what you give to your engineers. It's kind of our usual goal of like, let's, try to make everybody happy, because your board member does not want to see how to reproduce cross-site scripting. They don't. So.
The other thing is, we've also got bug tracker support. So, raise issues. And it's obviously something where you really, in most cases, you don't want to automate this initially. You want to go, let's see what's reported. Let's, check false positives and things. But, once you've gone through that, go, okay, these are real issues. Here's the bug tracker, raise them, So we can do that to some extent. We need to do better. But yeah, it's really important to have report different information to different levels within the organization, different, end users, because they want different things, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about that we hadn't asked about, or anything?
I think we've covered everything, really. Yeah. It's there's always more to talk about, but just have to come on next time.
I don't imagine the answer is yes to this. Do you have any other projects going on? I can't even imagine how much you work just running Zapped.
Well, do actually have another project going on. So the agreement with Crash Override is that myself and Ricardo spend 4 days a week working on Zap, which is brilliant, and 1 day a week working on Crash Override stuff. So Crash Override have a product called Chalk, but they also, there's a lot of other stuff going on, and myself and Ricardo are working on something which will be open source. So I'm not sure when it's going to be announced, but it won't be too long, I don't think. And it's something that's actually, it's fun, and we can use it in Zap. So that was one of the reasons they put us on. So it's different, and actually involves looking at source code. So we are starting to actually examine source code and extract information. But it won't be tied to Zap. It would just be, this is one particular use case, and there'll be plenty of other use cases out there. So watch this space.
That's actually pretty exciting, saying it involves source code. Okay. All right. I can't wait to hear more about that. We'll have to have you come back on whenever you guys are ready to talk about that. And we can give here's all the things you're not going to realize is there in 5 years that's always been there. And all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. So where can people find you and reach out to you, get involved with the community? Let me know some links and everything like that, or what's your socials and
zaproxy.org. That's the place to start. There's loads of stuff on there. There is a community section. There's a team section with social media links for all the team. There's links to the user group, the dev group. zaproxy.org is probably the best place to start. Everything's there.
Awesome. Cool. Well, man, I appreciate you so much coming on and talking about it. And I think it's been, I've learned some things. I've jotted a couple of things down to go back and look up, and definitely going to dive into, a little bit more of the HUD and some things like that, just to see. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on and talking about everything and taking time out of your alarmingly busy schedule.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, definitely come back.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
Thanks, Sam.